Thanks for joining us today. We're here to learn a little bit more about capital projects and some of the pitfalls and the gaps that people experience when executing them, and what a good strategy looks like, as well as the things that you can do to mitigate your risk and have a better outcome in capital projects. I'm Rick Schmidt. I'm the business consultant for Van Meter. I've been in the industry for almost 40 years, working through primarily automation and instrumentation in industrial end user accounts. And my counterpart here is Scott Larson. I'll let him introduce himself.
Good afternoon, it's Scott Larson. Rick and I have worked together for many years in this space on capital projects. I have roughly 35 years of experience in automation controls and the process industry, and spent a great deal of time in a lot of large CapEx projects.
So before we get invested into this, let's talk about what a strategy is and why it's important. So the question that I have for the listeners is, do you have a strategy? And the answer in most cases is we don't. And then the next question is, what does one look like? So what we've determined is that without that strategy and that base framework for getting invested into that part of the project, what we want to do is lay out that framework, understand what the really important items are to pay attention to, and then start working through that. And by strategy, what do we mean by that? And the bullet points here are very specific to the things that we believe that if you pay attention to these items, you're going to have a much better outcome, reduce your risk, and come in on budget and on time. So defining the scope of work is a big one. You need to understand in very great detail what that scope looks like, because a lot of times you miss something. It isn't aligned with the organization, and this is a big pitfall where if it's not been done properly up front, you get halfway through the project and you realize that you've got to go back and start over on some of those things. Another one is the financial justification. We all know that we have to put numbers together for submittal during budgetary conversations within your organization. And if that's done poorly, or in some cases, not at all, the likelihood of you getting the money and then actually getting the real money that you need is very difficult to come through. And then functional requirements too, and that goes back to around the scope of the work. What does good look like? And making sure that you've got that figured out up front and that you've got alignment across your organization is extremely important to make sure that, again, you don't get in the middle of that project or at the end of that project and you haven't achieved what everybody thought you were achieving. The other piece and gap that we see is that you got to pick the right customer or the right partners, and making sure that they're aligned in and understand how you want that project to go and what good looks like at the end. You want to make sure that that partner fully understands, how you like to execute, and that the technologies and the different things that you're expecting to be used within this project are followed, and that alignment needs to be clear up front. The other piece of it is, do they have the capacity to do the project in the time frame that you want it done? So capital investment, let's use this slide as a grounding point. What does that mean? What are the attributes of that? And it's pretty straightforward, but it's typically a large scale project. It's some type of a greenfield, new facility. It could be a brownfield expansion or a modernization of an installed base of old technology. This requires typically extensive planning and resources, and may include a very long-term financial investment or payback. So let's talk a little bit about why are capital projects overwhelming? And, again, they're large, they're complex, they require a lot of resources. You have to have a very detailed, defined scope to be successful. The challenge there is making sure that you cover all the bases. And a lot of times you have limited project management experience and you have to go out and find that. And that can be a very difficult skill set to find or service to find. And it needs to be tailored to your specific industry and those applications that you're working towards. The other challenge we have, and we've all lived through this, is the volatile market dynamics, such as supply chain challenges or the volatility in even copper pricing, the commodities pricing. How do you budget for that initially and then see in some cases 20, 30, 40% increases in the matter of months as you're getting ready to start that project, that price increase, in a lot of cases you need to go back and ask for more money, or maybe the right thing to do there was to develop some of that extra in the beginning of that budgetary process. Lack of specifications. This is one that we get into all the time, where you don't have specifications designed to help your partners understand exactly what the expectations are. You've got maybe outdated ones. And the challenge there is you might be buying technology that doesn't communicate or work with other technologies. So this is the foundation of every good capital project, is making sure that you've got the specifications locked down and updated to current product standards that you're using. The other challenge that we see is that the partners that get engaged, or the vendors that are submitting bids, will not follow those specifications. So you may get a bid in and you need to go through that with a fine tooth comb to make sure that they actually saw the specifications and adhered to them. They'll take exceptions in many cases, and not understanding the ramifications or the unintended consequence of that acceptance or exception will create some major challenges that you'll find out in the middle of the project while you're well down that path. It can be very expensive to fix. The other thing that we're always looking for are stranded technologies or systems, and that goes back to defining scope and then understanding, what good looks like. You've got to fully understand what the installed base is and what you're communicating with, and working through that. Another one is partner execution challenges. The goal there is, when you select that partner, again, as I said earlier, making sure that they're aligned on exactly what the outcome is that you're trying to get to and how to get to that. And the next one is schedule challenges. We see this we saw this with supply chain. The biggest challenge was the delivery deadlines for the project may not be in alignment with the actual delivery of the products. So for example, MCCs went out well over a year when they had been in that 16 to 18 week lead time. And now all of a sudden you can't get the major power components that you need for the backbone of your new plant in time for that startup schedule. And that just creates cost overruns and all kinds of challenges. And then technology evaluation, that's another piece of that scope development, and making sure that you're buying things and putting things together that work and that are complementary. And it sounds like it's trivial or simple, but many times maybe an OEM will be using some type of a communications protocol that doesn't work with the backbone of your control system. And now you've got to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to either bring that in, change something out to make sure that it works and communicates. So these are just a subset of the things that you run into in these capital projects that make it so difficult to be successful.
Yeah, and Rick, we've talked about this a couple of times as well, that a holistic view of the entire project, right? Where we get into that stranded technologies or systems. Somebody that's looking, you're going to have your technology owners, like you referenced, in their areas, but somebody needs to look over the holistic view of the entire project, so that not one area is doing something that doesn't coordinate or communicate with the other areas of the project, right? And then making sure that you have those technology owners that are into the details, making sure they catch those exceptions or changes that some of the vendors are bidding, right? So we've run into that many times. And it's
That's a
difficult.
great point, Scott. And, making sure that you've got one point of contact during that project so that you can escalate quickly and efficiently and get a decision made in a timely manner, because that can bounce around within an organization and continue to create challenges when it needs to be solved efficiently.
Right? And effectively, start to make your schedule at risk, right? So,
Exactly. Okay, so this is nirvana. What if you could get exactly what you wanted when you wanted it? So on schedule and on budget. That's what we're all striving for. That's what we would love to have on our resumes. And but it's difficult to achieve, as we talked about in the previous slides. So what are the key components to success? And this will be a little bit redundant, but I'll try to hit the high points and the ones that we firmly believe are the ones that you really, really want to pay attention to. So we talked a little bit about specifications. Again, you got to have very clear lockdown specifications that your organization is aligned on, and that you use to make sure that whoever you're having bid and execute, there's adherence to that. Scott will be getting into some examples of how these things have come to fruition with some projects coming up here. But feed studies, they can be challenging to do. There's cost associated with doing that feed study, but the upfront work that you do in these feed studies really sets the stage for that foundation of a successful project. You have to pay attention to that. It's really a step that you can't skip. And Scott will be talking about a particular project where that'll come into play.
well, and Rick,
The
we've talked about, right, that a lot of projects are moving very fast, right? And so taking the time to do a feed study is somewhat painful, but in the long run, it's probably going to help manage your schedule and your budget and ensure that you will be on time and actually meet your budget and your startup schedule, right? So although they may seem painful on the front end, right, the long-term results definitely pay for that time and effort, right?
Absolutely. Um, Another big one is having a procurement plan. And by that, I mean understanding exactly what you're buying and the timelines on when you need to order that. So I talked a little bit about the MCC example earlier. That's a really good example of where if you have misalignment in that and you're not ordering things when you need them, that you run into challenges with your ability to set that project in run mode. The other side of it too is if you order too early, what do you do with all that equipment? Where does it go? We've got many examples, especially in the north where we have harsh winters, where they don't have the indoor space to stage the equipment, and it sits outside. You got snow. I've actually had snowplow damage in some of our customers' equipment because it wasn't set up and taken care of and staged properly. Those are things that you've got to take into consideration before you start issuing purchase orders, for sure. Another one is the ability to resolve a problem quickly. The last thing you want to do is be in the middle of the project and having that finger pointing session with another vendor or another service provider. You want to have a clearly defined issue resolution process and players. Who's going to get that phone call within each of the organizations to make sure that it's efficient, and we keep the emotion out of it, and we get decisions made in a very quickly done, timely fashion. Project methodology is another one that we really want to pay clear attention to. You get that methodology put together up front, and it's a template basically for capital projects moving forward. It can be a little bit overwhelming to try to put that together, but that's where organizations like Van Meter ourselves are there to help put those things together. Those are some of everything on this page is important, but those are some of the higher points that we've seen really get in the way of a successful project.
Yeah, another item, Rick, that we've talked about and that we've seen customers struggle with is on those key long lead time items. They don't necessarily have a backup plan if for some reason those don't come through or the schedule delays further on those items, right? So understanding and developing and forcing your vendors to have a backup plan in case those key items that are, pivotal around your whole project moving forward, have some type of backup plan, right? And so that's another key item, especially with a lot of the long lead time items that we're dealing with today.
Absolutely.
All right, so how do you reduce the overall risk of a project and the risk to your schedule and budget overruns? And Rick is touched on some of this, but I think again we want to really make sure that you understand that some of these, weak project execution is going to cause risk or cause challenges with your schedule and budget. And then, having outdated requirements or specifications really is a challenge that then you're working through if you do get a vendor that quotes something that doesn't meet uh, your current technologies because your specifications are out of date, then you're having to go through a re-bid process again. And so these are very key items that need to be done and looked at, and they simply do reduce your risk on really challenging your schedule and budget. So some of those items that are key to success is doing a front end, a very detailed RFP. And if you do that detailed RFP, a lot of times during that process, you really understand, what the actual budget needs to be, because you are capturing all of the components and all of the services that are involved. And so, developing an RFP really puts your organization and your team through the right process to make sure that the project is going to come out on the back end with what you want and what you need, and not problems, not areas you need to correct because the vendors didn't actually understand what your requirements were. The other way we touched on this earlier is to do a feed study. And as we have discussed, I know most projects are moving at a high speed and they're either design build or the timeline's very compressed. But doing this front end engineering study a lot of times catches things that are missed and that are change orders that tend to cause schedule overruns and budget overruns. And so taking the time to do that feed studies can save you in the long run and ensure that you really get what you really you meet your expectations with the project. So this is a slide that we often share with customers and walk through. This is really the life of a project, and I think the key to this slide is that you can read through these, but the key to this slide is that these first couple of areas, the vision creation and justification and the design slash engineering, those two areas really ensure success down the road. And if you don't do those, you tend to have struggles on, operating the new area or the new plant or the expansion and optimizing it and then maintaining it. And so it causes frustration and struggles long term if you don't do those two items, vision creation and justification and design slash engineering. Those are kind of the key success to the rest of the project and the long-term success of that, let's say, expansion or new plant. So we can't reiterate how important that is, and slowing down and doing the right diligence on those two areas on the front end of the project ensures success, not only within the project, but the long-term viability of that expansion or that plant. So we're going to hit a few examples here that that were key to customer success on their projects moving forward. And one of them is actually going through your specifications and modernizing those specifications and ensuring a lot of our customers, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, is that there's been acquisitions or new plants put in, and the specifications don't really cover a lot of the new plants or the other plants that have been acquired. And so understanding and getting the specifications up to date and complete so that it does cover some of the areas that possibly you have in new plants that you don't have in your plants today, and ensure that they're up to date, because those are the key, right, to your vendors understanding what you really want and what you need and what you're looking for long term in your large scale projects. So it's very key to, I know specifications are a huge animal and they take a lot of time, but if the specifications were put together 10, 15 years ago, they're probably outdated. So you need to take the time and to go back through them and make sure they're up to date. And Van Meter can help with that. We also have a lot of partners that can assist in that as well. This is a good example of putting together an RFP and taking the time to go through the details. This is a customer that was had 35, 40-year-old technology and a couple of lines that they had that were doing low-fat turkey products. And the diligence of going through the RFP and putting that together in some details so that the bidders can understand what the scope really is, and that you get a clear understanding and they have a clear understanding of the product that you want and the end result that you want with the project. In this case, there was an RFP. We put together an RFP for this project, and even though there was a great amount of detail in the project, there was significant differences in the bids, and so there was definitely some analysis of why the bids were different, and we spent some time working through that, and there were a few areas of clarity that we needed to work with the vendors on. And in the long run, it really ensured that the customer is going to get and understand the end result of the project. So a very key point to spend the time, put together a solid RFP that incorporates all the areas and ensures it references your specifications is very important to the result of the project. This is another example. We've talked about feed studies, and this is a situation where a customer was not sure exactly. They had a high level understanding of what they wanted. This is a customer that does large generator sets, and they wanted essentially a wizard to do the setup, because the size of the generator sets could vary from 1 to 32 generators. And so they wanted a wizard to kind of walk through the customer on the size of their system and configure it to meet their system. But they had a high level understanding of it, not necessarily the details. And so we quoted a feed study to help them define the scope. In the end, they decided that they thought the feed study was going to take too much time, and it was an investment they weren't sure that they really had the budget to invest in. So they decided not to go with the feed study, and it probably took 4 to 5 times longer for them to work through the solution and develop it, because they didn't spend the time defining the scope of the project up front. So another example that just taking that time and investing the money in the feed study will certainly help you, and a lot of times ensure success on the back end. And you end up, it's just something that I think we all know, is that you got to do that front end work and develop the scope and understand what we're trying to achieve before you jump into it. Otherwise, it just seems to take much longer and you're developing that scope while you're doing the project. And a lot of times you have to go through several iterations to get to where you want to be because you don't have that defined up front. So very key point, and know sometimes it's painful to stop the train down the tracks and slow everything down to spend the time to go through and define what really needs to be done in the scope, but it is a key item to success.
Well, and I think, Scott, the one thing that I would add to that is that the customer realized that they did need the feed study, and had they not spent the money, they would have probably spent a lot more trying to get the project to where it needed to go, ultimately to get a good result. So you're gonna pay one way or the other, and it's a step that you just can't skip.
No, agree. Agree. And so you spend the time up front, and I think it's a smoother process, and everybody understands the budget and the schedule, and you're definitely going to be more likely to stay on that schedule and be within that budget if you do this upfront feed. Otherwise, you are going to reiterate, and it'll take extra time and definitely extra money, right? So if you can avoid that, you're going to pay either way, right, Rick, as we've discussed?
Yep. So here's the question. How do I get started? And again, the bullet points that are here are designed to help lay out that initial foundation of these are the areas that you really want to pay attention to. So we talked about this, but making sure that you've got the scope development in detail and alignment within your organization. Make sure that all the stakeholders have signed off and are comfortable, because you don't want that conversation happening in the middle of the project. That can be very painful and very costly, and create time overruns as well. The financial justification, that's a must have. That's got to be done with diligence. And a lot of times, doing it internally is great if you're concerned about that information getting out. But getting a third party with a different set of eyes, a different set of questions, different experience to help with that justification can prove dividends. We do it all the time with our customer base. We talked about specifications. That's a must have. You got to have up-to-date specifications. We've got all kinds of people that are well versed in putting those together. So if you got questions or want to have us get engaged, we're happy to do that. Partner selection is another one. Many of the regional systems integrators are very good customers of ours. Scott and I have actually reached out to a majority of them to have the conversations around where do they want to be brought in, when, what industries, what is their sweet spot. So we've got a really good handle on who those players are in the different industries and what their experience level is, and we're happy to share that. Schedule and budget support. Again, you have to do those things and the diligence up front to really understand, hey, if I want to start up in, year XYZ, do I have enough time? We get this all the time where the customer has a compressed schedule, and there's absolutely no way they're going to meet that schedule. And the last thing you want to do is go down that path and be unsuccessful. Let's make sure that it's realistic. It's a lot more painful to miss it than it is to go back and readjust for that in an accurate way. So we have all kinds of people available, like I said, to help with these types of items. And we're just a phone call or an email away. Let us know if you've got questions and how we can engage. And the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of a flavor for what our team looks like and how that might apply.
Yeah, and Rick, I just one thing I want to reiterate, and you mentioned this, is that this is not easy to do, right? And so trying to do it internally and have all the right resources on your own team to do this is difficult, right? And so Van Meter's here and some of our partners to help, and especially around that financial justification. If you're trying to sell this to your organization, and a lot of times a third party or a different entity coming in and helping reiterate what the value is, and how they can help you realize that value and stay on budget and within schedule brings a lot of validity to the justification and helps sell it to the executives. So, bringing in a third party, whether it's one of our partners or Van Meter to help with that, a lot of times helps you work through that organization and the executives and gets the buy-in, right? So we definitely want to help, and I think either Van Meter or our partners can certainly help you through that process.
So this is a little bit of a commercial for Van Meter. I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. We don't have all the actual pictures, but this is designed to represent the staff that we have available to make sure that we're doing all the diligence up front, specifications, scoping, all of those types of things, the procurement plans. And then as we get into actually ordering or building it, staging, making sure that we're getting engaged in some of the commodity type items, like even wiring, for example. Our ability to engineer the wiring for a large capital project can reduce scrap to the tune of $2 or $3 million on some of these large capital projects. So this is what I call the Verizon slide. It's just meant to represent that we have all of these resources at our disposal to engage in the different aspects and the different timelines of your project to help make sure that you're picking the right technology, implementing it, running it, and then maintaining it long term. So that's the end of the presentation. If you've got questions, don't know where to get started, have a project that you'd like to talk about, we're here to support you in that capital project journey.
Yeah, so please reach out to us if you have questions, and we will certainly help where we can and help you work through this process. Rick and I thank you for spending the time with us today.